Radio 9 WCME, 928, 28 minutes past 9 o'clock. It is our pleasure to welcome Edmund Pelta in our studios. Mr. Pelta is a retired physicist. He's also the founder of Maine School Science Volunteers, MSSV. They are seeking engineers and physical scientists to volunteer in middle schools by participating in science and math classrooms in Maine schools. Mr. Pelta will speak about the program on Wednesday, April the 24th at 1:30 at Thornton Oaks Retirement Community, 25 Thornton Way, and the public is cordially invited. You can also jump on their website at www.maine-ssv.org. Mr. Pelta, thank you so much for coming in this morning.
You're welcome.
And we should mention that Ed is a Topsom resident as well.
That's right.
And Ed, how does someone who spends their life in physics, initially you taught, and I'm guessing that may have something to do with the answer you'll give to the question I'm about to ask. You taught, then you worked in industry. How did you get the idea, the motivation to establish an organization such as Maine School Science Volunteers?
Well, actually, we inherited a program that started in Boston at Northeastern University, and they sent a group up here to Maine to implant the program that they had started. So I joined that program, and I didn't invent it. I just became a part of another ongoing program. Then when the funding for the program from Boston dried up, I endeavored to set up the program here in Maine and make it independent so that we could continue without dependence on funding from Northeastern University.
And are you doing that? You are doing that.
We are doing that now. We've been doing it for about 18 years.
What is the source of your funding? And I ask that knowing you may not require a great deal because you are, after all, a volunteer organization, but I would think funding comes into play at some point. It always does.
About 2007, we received a fair amount of grant funding from various organizations, the National IEEE and, the National IEEE and a couple of other Maine charities. But in 2007, funding just literally disappeared. And since our volunteers really don't like fundraising, we simply banked what we had, and we've been living on that, on the money we had in the bank when the funding disappeared in 2007 and 2008.
Must have had a fair amount of money.
Well, it's a very small operation, doesn't cost a lot to run it. At that time, we had a couple of employees that took care of things like recruiting and placement, and we had to let those go, so we did it ourselves, which means the organization shrank a bit, and it's not growing.
Now, are your volunteers specifically going into these schools to teach engineering and physics?
No. Our charter is a little different from that. We go into the schools to simply help enhance the teaching of science. And so years ago, we did quite a few programs where we actually went in and did some teaching. When the teachers wanted some reinforcement in subjects that they felt that they could use some help with, and we went in and actually developed some class programs, and we actually taught a number of classes. Primarily, we were at that time teaching the teachers. But today, we are really augmenting the teachers, and we do a lot of after-school science club programs. In fact, that's probably 95% of what we do.
So you meet with the students who are in clubs after school, late in the day?
Well, most of the schools are set up for after-school programs of one kind or another. They even have a late bus that takes the students home after school programs because they have band and athletics and all sorts of other clubs. So we just are another one of the after-school activities.
Let's bring this down to earth a little bit. Give me an example of a project on which you might work, on which you, in fact, did work with a student. Maybe something that really got a kid excited, maybe interested in the things you're interested in.
Well, not so much a kid, because primarily we're working with a group of kids. Although out of that, we sometimes find one or two students that we're mentoring on a one-on-one basis. So out of a science club at Yarmouth, we found a couple of students that wanted to study a little bit more in the area of math. And one of our volunteers spends a couple of hours or an hour a week with those two students, just teaching them about concepts in math that they wouldn't probably have encountered in the school for another couple of years.
Yeah, I suspect you're talking here about students who are particularly excited, particularly motivated. They kind of stand out in a class that you might be working with?
Well, those are fun, but that's not the primary thrust. We're trying to get to students who don't have that kind of interest and incite some interest and enthusiasm for scientific subjects. And incidentally, if they become interested in science, they probably become interested in other academic pursuits also.
How do you do that? How do you instill excitement in the science field or even physics? Especially, I mean, science class, unless you're blowing something up, a kid's attention span is really not there.
The kids do like things that explode, I've got to say.
So do we. We've been out of school a long time, and we still enjoy that, too.
Well, we have one program with rockets, and the kids really want us to use pyrotechnic rockets that go bang and make a lot of smoke, but we're not interested in legal and lawsuits, so we have rockets that run on compressed air and water, which you can only use outdoors. And the kids have a lot of fun with them, but they aren't quite as spectacular as pyrotechnic rockets. They're not quite as dangerous either.
Now, in your experience, you've been doing this for 20 years with this organization. And I'm not saying this to point any fingers out there, because the teaching school is a tough job, and it's a thankless job, and they don't get paid enough money. But what have you seen the difference between, let's say, 20 years ago when the organization started to now? What's the caliber of the curriculum that's out there?
I don't know that I could track any change, because the individual schools change their curriculum faster than any trend. And we may find in a school that, say, physical science teaching has simply been dropped because the school felt that it was being done by a high school later on. Frequently it isn't, or for some other reason. So the schools change their curriculum faster than I think any national trend. And we're not really trying to observe or have any effect on the school's curriculum. We take what they give us.
In general, do you think kids are getting enough science education?
I don't think you can find anybody who would say they are. I certainly don't feel they are. But again, we're trying to enhance the quality of what they're getting and make them ask for more. And lots of times, particularly when they get into high school, they have some electives, and we'd like them to elect scientific subjects.
It seems too that the focus has gone off of engineering. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that after World War II, that's where everybody went, became engineers in the GI Bill. And you look back at some of the shows that we watched in the 50s, like Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons, and all of those dads were engineers or architects that got their college degrees on the GI Bill. And now we don't see that as much.
Well, I was
anymore.
one of those.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Well, we don't have any program like the GI Bill. It was probably the greatest program we ever initiated in the United States, but we don't do that anymore. Make it fairly expensive for people to get a degree in anything.
Now, here in the United States, we're also, again, I don't mean to get you into the political fray here, but we also hear that there's not enough factories. We don't make our own products here anymore. You as a professional, you as an educator, what is your recommendation? What should we be doing to increase the amount of science that's taught in schools and to get this country back on track from a scientific standpoint?
I don't think I'm really qualified to answer that question. It's such a broad question. I think that a lot of the products that we used to manufacture here have gone overseas because of the perception that the cost of the labor content is less overseas. I think we're beginning to see that isn't necessarily true anymore, and some products are drifting back home. I don't think we have much influence in that area, and if we spent our time trying to influence that area, we probably wouldn't do much with the school programs.
Mm-hmm. What are you going to be, give us a little bit of a preview, what are you going to be talking about in this lecture or speech, or however you choose to classify it, coming up at Thornton Oaks Retirement Community on the 24th of April, I believe that is.
I think so. 1 o'clock or 1:30?
1:30.
1:30, all right.
Yeah.
Primarily, we're looking for volunteers right now. And Thornton Oaks and the Highlands are both places where there are a lot of retired people, and a lot of them are retired scientific professionals, and we hope to encourage some of those people to join us, because at the present time, we have more demands or requests for class programs than we can properly man. For a long time, it was the other way around. We were having trouble getting acceptance, and we had volunteers that were not really busy. Right now, we have every volunteer pretty fully committed, and we're looking for some more.
So it's difficult to find people who do what you've been doing for 20 years.
It is. Just because we don't have an organization that's devoted to outreach. Back in the days when there was funding, there were full-time people who went out and recruited. They ran programs with press releases and bulletin board things like that, and volunteers just appeared. We don't have the funding for that anymore, so we don't have an easy time finding volunteers. Let me correct one thing that has gone through the discussions earlier. The program, when it originally started, was aimed at physical sciences. As we began to look at our volunteer group, we're finding that we have more scientists who are in earth sciences or human sciences So we have some biochemists, we have some physicians, and geologists, and people that are not normally considered to be physical scientists. And so of the volunteers we have right now, probably half of them are physical science, and the other are in some other branch of science.
If people wanted to get involved with this, can they get the information or get in touch with you via the website at www.maine?
Yes, absolutely. Or we're happy to have anybody pick up the phone and call us.
What number should they call, sir?
Well, I think I'll have to defer on that because I believe it's Winnie Chan's number, and I don't remember it.
Okay, I don't.
We'll present that at the meeting at Thornton Oaks.
Okay, so the meeting is going to be Wednesday, April the 24th at 1:30 at Thornton Oaks Retirement Community, 25 Thornton Way. The public is cordially invited. And if you'd like to volunteer or get some more information, you can jump on the website at www.maine-ssv.org. Our guest this morning has been Ed Pelta. He's the founder of MSSV, which is Maine School Science Volunteers, and they're looking for engineers and physical scientists to volunteer.
And scientists, period, not physical sciences necessarily.
Okay, well, we'll beat the bushes for you, sir.
Thank you. We can use all the help we can get.
Ed Pelta, thank you so much for coming in.
Let the record show that the totality of the intelligence quotient in this room has jumped markedly in the last few minutes. Nothing to do with either Richard or myself, but all because of our guest.
As usual, I didn't study for the test.